I have fairly severe osteoporosis. I had a T-score lumbar of -3.6. After I had my diagnosis, I had a big fall. I fell hard and I fell onto my right hip and my lower back. And I had the kind of spasm when I landed where I couldn't move. It was a big fall.
Yeah.
I was up and walking the same day, but I know for my body, that's the best thing that I can do.
Today we're talking about bone health, something many of us don't think about until we hear words like osteoporosis or osteopenia. My guest is Alison Crouch, who has spent decades working in the field of movement and laterally focusing more on osteoporosis after her own diagnosis. Together we unpack what's actually happening in your bones, how these conditions can develop, and how people can find out if they're at risk. We also get into the practical side of things, what really helps keep bones strong, the role of strength, impact and balance, and how everyday movement fits into this picture. So whether you're simply curious about bone health, wanting to prevent problems later in life, or navigating a diagnosis yourself, this is a really reassuring and practical conversation about how to keep moving with confidence. Today we are welcoming the fantastic Alison Crouch, who's coming here to talk to us about bone health, movement and osteoporosis. She is an expert in the field and I have 1,000 questions for her. Are you ready?
Hit me.
So we're going to go straight into what osteoporosis is, because I think in discussing osteoporosis, osteopenia, and how that's affecting bones, then bone health is generally going to be coming up in that anyway. So if you can do, it's kind of a bit of a 101 about what it is, so that we can sort of start the conversation there.
Sure. So osteoporosis is a condition in which low bone density leaves a person vulnerable to fracture. And I think that's an important part of the conversation, that it's not just about the number that you get with a diagnosis. It's about the fact that it leaves you more vulnerable to fracture. And that's what we really want to work on and avoid. And we can absolutely work on and avoid. So do you want me to get technical?
Yeah, a bit, please, from my own education, as much as anything.
So osteoporosis is diagnosed through something called a DEXA scan, dual X-ray scan, bone scan, which scans your lumbar spine, your total hip, which is the place where your leg bone meets your hip socket, and your femoral neck, which is the narrow bridge of bone between the main part of your thigh bone and your hip. I often have people coming to me feeling super panicky because they've been told they have osteoporosis in their femoral neck, and their doctor hasn't bothered to explain that that's not here.
Okay.
And they're frantic that they're going to fracture their neck. And like, no, it's okay. You're good. It's okay.
Oh gosh, yes.
Right. So peak bone mass builds through the first part of your life. We tend to get peak bone mass around the age of 30. And then it kind of plateaus for a while. And then we tend to see diminishing bone mass later in life. For women, the first 5 to 7 years post-menopause tends to be a time, as estrogen is dropping, that we see a pretty significant loss of bone. And for some people, that loss of bone stays in the normal range. For some people, it drops some into a condition of low bone density, which is osteopenia. And then for some people, it goes down to osteoporosis. So your T-score, if you have a DEXA and somebody says your T-score this is the measurement of how much bone mass you have as compared to that kind of peak bone mass healthy 30-year-old.
Okay.
And people go, well, that doesn't make sense. I'm not a healthy 30-year-old. I'm a healthy 60-year-old. But that's kind of the point. We want a baseline of like probably what your peak bone mass was like, so we can see how much it's dropped relative to that. So there's some element of consistency in the measurement. So, we know that nobody is the same. Bodies are not the same. So normal is a range. So if we take
tell me what those sort of numbers are. Yeah, sorry, you're just
So if 0 is kind of the starting point. We would say anything above 0 and down to minus 1.5 would be normal.
Okay.
And then between minus 1.5 and minus 2.5 is considered to be osteopenia. So we're now down to like 2.5 deviations, standard deviations below norm, is kind of a starting point where we're seeing, okay, so you're losing a little bit more bone than we would like. And anybody who's in that situation, it's actually brilliant to get that information, because you can start to take action in terms of, movement, bone load, and nutrition. Like, take it seriously, because you can absolutely hold it or improve it and avoid coming down. So then below minus 2.5 is the diagnosis of osteoporosis. And when I got my diagnosis, I have fairly severe osteoporosis. I had a lumbar T-score of minus 3.6, which ultimately went down. The lowest I got was minus 4. And I was looking and looking and looking to see, but how low does it go?
Yeah.
Like, is there a bottom end? Where am I relative to the bottom end? And I've never been able to find a bottom end. But after working with hundreds of people and anecdotally conversing with thousands probably, the lowest I've seen is in the minus 5s, minus 5.5-ish, is considered to be extremely low. But even as a person who has quite low bone density, like, I'm a scuba diver and a sailor, and I lift weights, and I teach Pilates, and I clean my house and go hiking, and it doesn't need to be the big, terrible news diagnosis that I think some doctors still present it as.
It can be,
right?
it can, as you said, it's information that can help you to make choices, and those choices are yours. And there's lots of, as you've just listed off, great choices, whole variety. There is no reason to be living your life in a hugely different way. And in fact, probably that cotton wool that you may feel you should wrap yourself in is potentially one of the worst things that you can do.
Yeah. We do want to think about how we're moving. There are ranges of motion that we want to limit, not eliminate, because we don't want to walk around like sticks, not moving our spines. And depending on your vulnerability to fracture, there may be some changes that you want to make, but not moving, wrapping yourself in cotton wool, feeling like you have to be careful about everything is absolutely, in many ways, the worst thing you can do, because we know that being strong and being mobile and being active are the best ways to maintain your balance, your agility, your coordination, and stimulate your bone cells all at the same time. So
absolutely.
Keep having your life.
Yes, exactly. Well, just to take a slight step back, what's actually happening within the bone itself that means low bone density? What does that actually mean?
That's a very complicated question. The mechanism of osteogenesis it's affected. So osteogenesis is the word for the increase in bone cells, and it is affected by your movement, but it's also affected by your endocrine system and your nutrition and your gut health and your genetic health. There's interesting research being done on exactly which genes contribute to the various on and off mechanisms that affect, calcium absorption or that affect, so there's a lot. But from my perspective as a movement person, bone cells require load and stimulation. So there's two different, again, sort of, this is kind of the simple approach, but I think of it as there's two things that affect bone cells. They need squish force and they need pull force. So squish force is compression, and that's weight bearing exercise. So that's walking, running, jumping, hiking, skipping, stair climbing. It's anything where you're upright, and the combination of the ground force reaction from below and your body weight and gravity from above are creating this process where if it's an intense enough movement, the bone cells are experiencing this squish factor. And if it is significant enough, there's some research to suggest that for like clear signaling to the bone cells, it needs to be 3.5 times your body weight.
Right.
Which is why we used to think walking was enough. And now we realize walking is not enough, which was very sad for me as a walker.
Yes.
So that 3.5 times your body weight, if that's appropriate for you, because it's always different from body to body, is enough to kind of make the bone cells go, oh, this is more squish factor and being deformed more in this direction than I had anticipated. We should bring more bone cells in to make that a doable situation. And then muscle contraction is the same thing with a tensile force. So your muscles are contracting hard enough. The muscles contract, the tendons pull on the bone. There's this mechanical signal to the bone cells that we need to have more bone. So for whatever reason, whether it's genetics, whether it's, another health condition, some other health, osteoporosis can be secondary to other health conditions. Maybe, in my case, it looks like I didn't have good gut absorption, good gut health from the time I was a baby. So I probably wasn't absorbing my nutrients. So my peak bone mass may not have been very high. Early menopause.
Yeah.
Because estrogen is a big part of the bone situation. There's really no way to know exactly what it is. We know there are predisposing factors that tend to lead to, they seem to be common in people who have a diagnosis, but what actually happens to create the osteoporosis, we don't really know, which is frustrating.
And that is kind of where I was going, because I don't know in other countries, but certainly in the UK, unless you're someone who goes and gets annual checks and pays, the only way you could do that is to pay yourself. On our National Health Service, you only ever get a DEXA scan if you have had a fracture from a minor fall. So it seems incongruous, and or obviously you're over a certain age, and that you have a list, as you said, of certain other conditions that sort of spark their interest. Or I think if there is some kind of family history of, everyone has had a hip fracture before me at a young age, therefore, I will get checked earlier. But for people who aren't in those at-risk categories, who hopefully know they are, and generation on generation has said, you need to get checked early, and hopefully they've made changes in their life earlier for their children and so on. But for those who have no idea, because they've not been checked, they've not had a fracture, is this something that can develop very quietly and you have no idea? And I don't want to be saying that to scare people, but at the same time, is that the case?
Absolutely, it's the case. Osteoporosis is both an invisible condition and a silent condition. So, the good news to that is you can have it and have a fantastic life and feel absolutely fine. The challenging part of it is, there is no way to know unless you've had a DEXA, or there's a new scan called the REMS scan, which is ultrasound based, which is another assessment tool. DEXA is the gold standard. It's been around for a long time. It's been studied for many years. There are people who don't like it very much, but it's very effective. And
MRI? An MRI? Does that? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. But that's probably only if you're looking for it. I'm thinking about, again, the UK Health Service. I think unless it was really obvious and that's what they were looking for, I'm not sure that would necessarily come up. I don't know.
Certainly here, it's not the primary diagnostic. You would be getting an MRI for something else.
Yeah.
And they would see it, but they wouldn't, here at least they wouldn't say, that's going to be your diagnostic tool of choice. And so I think it is incredibly sensible to think about bone health, from an early age. And some of the things are really basic, eat a wide variety of foods. Don't get completely obsessed with, I must have this and this and this for bone. Just like eat a wide variety of foods, chew your food well. This is one of the tips from the nutritionist who contributes to my program. She's like, it's the easiest thing. Makes your body more able to accept nutrients. Chew your food.
So
active.
you mean so it's more absorbable?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not just passing through in a sort of, as fiber, even though some of it's not. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. She's like, that's digestion starts in your mouth. Be active in a variety of different ways. And that can be more challenging than it seems like it should be. Like if you're not naturally an active person and you're 34 and you're in like deep in it with little kids and working and parents and family and volunteering and you're not naturally an exerciser, and osteoporosis seems like it's so very far away and unlikely, but that's a really good time to make sure that when you take the kids to the park, you're playing with them, right? And running and jumping with them. It's a really good time to, instead of going and sitting down to have coffee with a friend, go for a ramble.
Yeah.
Go and have a hike in a local, like in a good park or something, so that we're introducing our bodies to this idea that there's going to be a continuous loading of bone cells in lots of different ways, in lots of different directions, and reasonably consistently. And we know that, so I just mentioned, we now know that walking is not the number one tool for increasing bone density, but there does seem to be evidence that suggests people who walk briskly, and it does need to be briskly,
yeah.
So like 130 to 136 beats per minute if you're listening to a soundtrack as you go, which is totally what I do. For like half an hour, 5 times a week, it may not affect their bone density. And this was an assessment I believe was done on people with osteoporosis. So, take that for what it's worth. Had a significantly lower incidence of hip fracture.
Okay.
And that's what we're looking for, right? Like,
yeah,
whatever your T-score is, whatever your bone density measures as, if you're avoiding fractures, you're having a great life.
Yeah.
It's all good. So these activities that may or may not change bone density, but have a really profoundly effective contribution to your quality of life, like that's, to me, that's kind of the magic sweet spot.
And I think part of being able to prevent a fracture is we can't prevent falling. Everyone is going to fall at certain points in their life. That's absolutely normal. How we fall is important, and challenging our balance on a daily basis means that our nervous system and our muscles are ready for that sort of the odd movements of nearly falling that we need to get used to, because then I presume, and I don't know if there's any data on this, but in my mind, the more you are used to that sort of varied and slightly erratic movement patterns, and also if you've, from my perspective, and I know yours, if you've been working with moving on the floor, you're used to getting up and down to the floor a lot, your brain's very used to that, then in my mind, you'll be slightly more relaxed for your fall. I know that sounds odd, but it will feel more normal to travel that distance, and you'll probably, hopefully, land a bit better because you're used to all those variety of movements that if you're upright, walk less, sit a lot, and don't create all those shapes and those different loads and varieties through your muscles, through your bones, then you are, it's going to be a different outcome potentially. Obviously, none of that is based on fact. It's just what I think, I really believe from the experience of me and my clients, where it just feels, so many people say, I had a fall and I laughed. I was okay. I was fine, and I still fall, and I can be really clumsy as well. I'm hypermobile, so my proprioception's not bang on.
Same.
Yeah, there we go. And therefore, I know I'm going to be, and clumsy is totally wrong. It's not who I am. It's just that my body doesn't quite work the way it could do. But I know that therefore in the long run, that's always going to be a thing. I'm always going to kind of knock into things, slightly trip over things. And I think those are good things. Those erratic movements are good things. And if you're not out walking and clambering over things and going under things and around things, then your body's just not used to that. And therefore it's even sort of less protected. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%. I don't know about data in terms of falling well, but certainly there is data that suggests that active, dynamic, progressive balance training absolutely reduces fall incidence. And most fractures, even in an osteoporotic body, are the result of fractures. There are spontaneous compression fractures and other movement created, which is why we do this limit, not eliminate certain spinal movements, but most are the result of falls. And so, getting your inner ears familiar with being in different orientations to gravity and orientations to the ground, getting up and down. So if you do fall, you can get back up. You're not stuck there.
Yeah.
I have a client who, one of the things that I work with my clients is body awareness and alignment and posture, largely because that's just a word that people are comfortable with. But and she said, and we were doing a check-in. She's like, I realized, and I've probably been doing this for years, I almost always have a hand on the wall, on the furniture, as I move through the world. If there is something for me to be touching, I do. And I have deliberately stopped doing that. And I can feel already after a week that my balance is better and my sense of where I am in space is better. And it's really interesting, those habits that we have, that we build. And usually those habits come out of a really sensible place, right? Like maybe you twist an ankle, or I tend to do the same thing on stairs. I am also hypermobile, so I am also a little bit, and I'm blind in one eye.
Oh gosh.
So I have no peripheral vision to this side and very little depth perception. I have some vision, but not very much. So I always have a hand, if it's available, on the wall or on a banister when I'm going downstairs, because I can't really see where the next step is, really. But I'm very conscious of not doing that anywhere else, because I don't want to become reliant on, an external object. And it's interesting what you say about falls, because I have, as you said, I have fallen. I have had back spasms. They are fine. I know how to manage them and deal with them. And shortly after I had my diagnosis, I had a big fall.
Okay.
So I have, at my studio, I have a tree branch, and it's, as tree branches are, it's not a cylinder, it's a twisty shape. And I've been using that as like a foot thing and a balance game for years. And I know that you get to a certain point, and because of the shape of the branch, it flips and you can't stay on it. You have to, that's the moment where you have to step off. And I'd been away from the studio for a few weeks. We'd been on vacation, and I came back, and I had a gap between clients, and I was playing on the branch, and I fell off, and I fell hard, and I fell onto my right hip and my lower back. And I had the kind of spasm when I landed where I couldn't move. I had to kind of crawl along the floor to find my phone. I had to call my husband and my son to come and get me. I had to cancel my clients. I was like, it was a big fall.
Yeah.
And, I was up and walking the same day. I looked ridiculous, as one does when one's trying to walk with a giant back spasm. But I know for my body, that's the best thing that I can do. But there was a completely different experience of fear that I had never had before.
Yeah.
Because I know I'm vulnerable to fracture in my lower back. And I fell hard. And so technically that would be considered a low trauma fall, because anything that is less than, it's either 1 or 2 steps. Like if you fall from the ground, that's considered to be a low trauma fall, because it's where we would, like you say, we would expect somebody to just kind of get bruised and scraped and get up and carry on. But it was a pretty dramatic, it was because of the whole flipping on the bridge, it was pretty dramatic. And I had to be very deliberate with myself. And I went to my doctor and I'm like, okay, so I'm afraid I have fractured a vertebra in this falling experience. And she's like, I'm watching you move and I can see that it's painful. I can also see that you're moving. This is soft tissue. This is a muscle spasm. Your muscles have tightened up to protect the area. It's going to pass. You're going to be okay. And it was interesting for me because it gave me such a great window into what sort of the average person is likely to feel under those circumstances.
Yeah.
And how tempting it is then to, like you said at the beginning, to like wrap yourself in cotton wool and make sure that that doesn't happen again. Instead of going, oh, yeah, I do. I have severe osteoporosis. I did a big fall.
And I'm okay.
And I'm okay. Because I know how to, hit and roll. I know how to take literal steps very shortly after to diminish the full spike.
And you knew to move straight away as well.
Yeah.
You knew
right
that
away.
If you were laid out, restricting your movement and in panic mode, you would be doing the worst thing for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 So maintaining that, finding a way, I mean, that's sort of a bigger, more dramatic moment, but for a lot of people, when they get a diagnosis like that, that is the instinct, is to just freeze and fall back, partly because there's so much information on the internet and it's really hard to tell what's true and what's not.
Yeah.
And then you and I talked about this just briefly. There's a sense that your body has betrayed you, especially if you are a mover.
Yeah.
And I think that was, and I hear this from people all the time, I was doing all the right stuff, right? I'm moving and I'm walking and I'm, some people are lifting weights and some people are, doing parkour. I don't know, like whatever it is that you're doing, you're eating well, and then you get this diagnosis. And it creates this sense of otherness with your body instead of feeling like, oh, like my brain and my body are all really integrated. My body, she's my friend. We can move together. And if we can keep moving after the diagnosis in ways that we love and that feel good, that stay inside the kind of the choices that you've made around your decisions around spine smart movement, I think it makes the diagnosis so much easier to manage because you're reclaiming your sense of confidence in movement and you are, honoring your sense that movement is important. Or maybe for some people, a diagnosis, and the best is when this happens with osteopenia.
Yeah.
Right? You get told you have osteopenia and it kind of opens up this door for people who wouldn't otherwise be super active or who don't find movement appealing or entertaining. They're like, all right, well, I guess I have to do it now.
Yeah.
But then in that process, find things that they love. Oh, all of a sudden I've discovered I like line dancing. Oh, I've discovered I was never a weightlifter. Oh, I was a weightlifter very briefly. So in my 20s, I was a stagehand. I was an electrician at Phantom of the Opera. And at that time, it was it's still a very male-dominated business, but at the time, I think there were 3 women in a union of well over 200 men.
Gosh.
So I had a very big chip on my shoulder. I was
You had to prove yourself. You were like, I'm doing this for the women.
I am doing this for the women. And then I was the first woman to take a maternity leave and get my job back.
Oh, wow. The first. Oh, my goodness.
We used to joke, we're going to drag them kicking and screaming into the 70s. Anyway, at that point in my life, I did lift weights because I'm 5'3", and at the time I was about 97 pounds. I was really tiny and I needed to do a lot of physical labor and I needed to be able to do it along with the 200 men. And then I got fibromyalgia. So that kind of put paid to all of that. And my natural instinct is Pilates and flowy movement and restorative exercise and functional movement and stretching and rolling, and like that's my instinctive sweet spot. And when I got my diagnosis, I was like, oh, okay, I actually have to get serious about lifting some weights. And now I really like it.
So tell me about how that process there, because there's so many people who really don't like the idea of the gym. And obviously you really don't need to go to a gym to lift weights. If you want to invest in weights, obviously there is an investment there. And annoyingly, they are quite expensive. The heavier they get, it's almost like pushback about getting heavier. But there's also lots of things that are heavy. So how did you kind of get your head from not being interested? Or was it just actually, I have some information here and I need to change my ways. I'm now informed that I need to add load. This is something I have to do. Was it more that? Because the problem I have with that for everyone else is that if they haven't got the diagnosis, how do you shift unless you really see it as an important thing? Not just, most people are not that bothered about aesthetics by midlife, but more that, it's just so far removed from your reality. How do you think we can encourage people to get to the point that seeing load is really important, and bringing that into life?
So that's a whole series of really amazing points. So for me, it really was the diagnosis. Yeah. I'm sure I would not be where I am now if it weren't for the diagnosis. And I did not start at the gym. And I think with osteoporosis specifically, or bone density specifically, there's been a real message over the last few years about you have to lift heavy. If you're not lifting heavy, well, do you even lift, bro? So lifting heavy is considered to be, because of the Lift More trial, which happened in 2017, it was an Australian study. It was groundbreaking. It was the first study to show that women with osteoporosis can safely lift heavy weights and see an increase in their bone density because of it. Yeah. On average, they didn't all increase bone density, but many of them did. And their control group for that, so they had these people who were in the gym lifting really heavy, under supervision, 3 times a week, super consistently, and their control group to whom they were being compared were at home doing an unsupervised, mat workout with a little bit of balance.
Right.
So, of course, the people in the gym did better.
Yeah.
And lifting heavy is considered to be 80 to 85% of the weight that you could lift one time. And typically that works out to the amount of weight you could lift 3 to 5 times. And then you can't lift it anymore. That's heavy. That's for most people, that's your body weight. Yeah. Or more. And so there's been this feeling of like, well, but you can't do that without going to the gym. You can't do that without having really big sandbags. You can't, that's very demanding, and it's incredibly off-putting for most people. So it's very nice that now we've got more research that's indicating that moderate weightlifting is also really effective. And that's in that kind of 8 to 12 repetitions where you're really puffed. Like you need to be making funny faces and having to breathe through it by the end of your set.
And also in terms of just a question, and also towards the end of that, feeling like you're going to fail and having to put the weights down. Is that important as well?
So generally we want to go to fatigue, not failure.
Okay.
So if you're lifting moderately, you want to be, let's say your target is 10, you want to know that you could do 11 or 12 without dropping, because we want to be controlled, especially if you're in the osteoporosis range. Sure. That kind of 1 rep max, 2 rep max, you're going to lift and drop it. That's a different kind of training. So we don't need to do that. So yes, there is that drive with a diagnosis to take on really intentional weightlifting. But the other thing is you don't have to have osteoporosis to benefit from it. Like we're seeing that strength training is incredibly important for maintaining muscle mass. which we already knew, but that's really important for women in menopause and perimenopause. And, we're all going to hit that. You might have great bone density, but, at some point we are all going to hit that perimenopause and menopausal phase. And it's really looking like strength training is a great element to making that transition smoother and easier and less, intrusive. So that's a pretty good motivator. And I didn't start going to the gym until about a year ago. Now, as you said, I have quite a lot of weights at my house, and in Canada, they tend to be about $1 a pound. So, 5-pound weights, not so bad. 45-pound weights, starting to get a little more expensive.
It's when your postman or delivery man comes to the door and he can't lift the box. And then you're like, okay, this is getting really heavy. But that's because I have a family of males predominantly. So the weights that are in the gym are not necessarily the weights I can lift. Right. But they go up.
But they're there.
They go up. And they do. And when I want to lift really heavy and do something like a farmer's carry of my own body weight, it is actually available, because for them it's more normal. It's easier for them to lift. For me, it's not. But I am lucky that I have it there. Yeah, exactly. I'm just taking a quick break to share something I'm really proud of. My book, Move Well for Life, which is now officially out in the world. I wrote this book because so many people, despite feeling like they're doing all the right things, exercising enough, being active, and generally looking after themselves, come to me still feeling stiff, restricted, or worried about what aging might mean for their bodies. This book helps make sense of why that happens, and more importantly, what you can do differently. The book is not a workout plan to blindly follow and hope it will stick. It's a practical, reassuring guide about learning how to move better in your own daily life. We look at how you sit, walk, get up and down, reach, rest and move in the many in-between hours, so the way you move actually supports you for the long term. As Kay Cleave, known as Aging Disgracefully on Instagram, put it, this is the book we all need to read, especially as we age, to help us enjoy moving our amazing bodies. And Rosie Nixon, author, speaker and editor, described it as a life-changing book for anyone looking to live better for longer. The book is accompanied by a handy downloadable template for the everyday movement plan we work through in the book, touching on all 6 principles of the Move Well Wheel framework and helping you apply the changes to create long-term habits using the Everyday Ease method. You can buy Move Well for Life now on Amazon, Waterstones and bookshop.org. You can also request it through your local independent bookshop or your local library. And just to share one more endorsement that made me feel really proud, GP Susan Tahiri, a previous podcast guest on Make Movement Matter, said, "This is definitely a book I'll be recommending to my patients. If you want a kinder, accessible and more sustainable way to move, one that actually fits the life you live, this book is for you." Now, let's get back to the episode. Otherwise, it does feel like you have to be at a gym to do that, which is frustrating.
So then you were saying, there's lots of other heavy things, and that's absolutely true. And for someone who does not have osteoporosis, but is thinking a little bit forward of like, okay, the research is suggesting that, loading bone cells is important. I would like to have a good perimenopausal menopausal phase. I'd like to avoid osteoporosis. How can I do that without going to the gym? And there are all kinds of things that we can just haul around. You do have to do it with a certain amount of intention. You have to be like, this is my bag of mulch that I don't put in the garden. I keep it for, I keep it for hauling around. One of the interesting things around that kind of movement with that kind of object, like sandbags, bags of mulch, bags of kitty litter, like just, here's a 20, 25-pound bag of something I can maneuver, is that's easier for people who don't already have osteoporosis, because one of the things we want to limit when we already have the condition is weighted flexion.
Okay.
Right. So curving forward with weight is putting more load on the fronts of the vertebrae, and it's the fronts of the vertebrae that are more at risk of fracture.
Yeah.
And so those kinds of unwieldy objects can be a little bit more challenging to maneuver, especially if it's all the way down on the ground.
Yeah.
Right? Like a weight has a hole in it.
Yeah.
right? If it's a dumbbell, it's like this. If it's a kettlebell, it has a handle. It's easier to get it up off the floor from a hip hinge position.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you've got quite a lot of hip and knee mobility, those big bag type objects are harder to.
You've got to get very low to get to them. Yeah.
Yeah. So, if you don't like the gym and you do want to be slinging heavy stuff around and you already have osteoporosis, then you would probably want to keep your non-weight item or items up on a bench or a table or something that's higher off the ground so you can kind of get it up and hold it, whether you're kind of holding it in front of your chest and doing squats or you're walking around with it, right? Doing kind of another version of a farmer's carry.
Yeah.
Or like a hay bale farmer's carry rather than a.
Yeah.
Then that kind of thing is absolutely viable. And hopefully part of what happens is if you're lifting weights, and everybody's amount of weight is different. A moderate weight is not about a number.
Yeah.
Right? A moderate weight is not 12 pounds. A moderate weight is the amount of weight that any one individual person can do the exercise 8 to 12 times. Yeah. So for some people, if you've never done weights before and you're deconditioned because you've had an injury or, you've just had your third baby in 5 years and you're just really flipping tired, right? And you're super strong for baby carrying, but you're not super strong for other things, right? Whatever. It doesn't matter what the reasoning is. For some people, starting with light weights makes a lot of sense, right? For people who have arthritis or hip issues or back issues or diastasis recti, there's reasons to start with lighter weights where you feel like your form is good, your technique is good, you understand the movement pattern, you can get a bit nerdy into like how your hips are moving. And make it a bit fun. Make it an opportunity to increase your own awareness of how your body moves and what things you are kind of naturally adept at. So like as a hypermobile person, hip hinging is not a problem for me. Like I have lots of hip mobility, but I was also born with club feet. So I have a hypermobile body that has absolutely no ankle mobility at all. Oh, wow. So squats are tough.
Yeah.
Because a squat means you need to move your ankles, your knees, and your hips all at the same time. My ankles don't really move. So I find that to be really fun and cool to play with. Yeah. As opposed to this kind of social media imposed, everything needs to be perfect and needs to look a certain way. Like my body's different. Yeah. And that's okay.
And being all right with it so that, and knowing what those things are. So you might not specifically know, but you might, because you might not have that sort of understanding of your anatomy and the way it moves, because most people don't, but unless you've nerded out on it, but just getting that sense of what it feels good to you. I think that's what's important. It's what feels good, what feels open to you, and making sure that you go there and you do it rather than feeling the restriction of all the sort of, as you say, the rules of do it in this way and then change it to this. And we're working in these sort of linear, very prescriptive patterns that don't mimic reality. And that variety, we've mentioned it already, the variety, and I talk about it so much, is just so key to give all those inputs. I actually have one question for you that I don't want to forget, and I will if I don't watch out, which is with the walking thing and then prevention, how effective is adding load to walking? So there's obviously loads of stuff on the internet about weighted vests. Then there's rucking, which, I think it came from the American Army, that term originally, where, you've got a backpack full of stuff to it. Their stuff was a lot heavier probably than the stuff that I would put in for longer distance. But how much does that help you to make walking effective? She's really not giving me the right signs.
I'm not. I'm sorry.
Really? Okay, really? Go. Tell me.
So this is very sad for people who have bought weight vests and disappointing for people who like rucking. Bone cells adapt to stimulation incredibly quickly.
Right.
Like incredibly quickly. There was one now. This was an in-lab study. So we always need to be a little bit careful about studies that are cells in labs and animal studies as opposed to humans. But that the bone cells stopped responding to similar stimuli within 20 to 60 cycles. So that's 20 to 60 steps, or 20 to 60 runs, or 20 to 60 jumps, right? So unfortunately, and again, that kind of for optimal effect, we're looking, again, this research is fairly new, so it could change. But this 3.5 times body weight, again, which is a lab study, like that's, we're not wearing weight vests that have 2.5 times our body weight in them.
No, because we would be on the floor.
Because that would not be good. And the weight vest studies, because I know this is a thing. So there's some people on the internet who are like, weight vests are the answer to everything.
Yeah.
There are a couple of studies that are frequently referred to. In one of them, people were wearing the weight vest for 8 hours a day. And in the other one, they were wearing weight vests, but they were also doing squats and lunges and deadlifts and impact, all of which we know are incredibly helpful for bone density. So was it the weight vest, or was it all the other things? They were very small studies. They were not very well designed studies. And they don't take into account the fact that this is where variety is queen. This is where, yes, we absolutely want weight bearing as part of a bone density or a bone health approached program. Yeah. It's important, but it's more, I wonder, and this is not science, this is not evidence-based, this is a little bit your feeling about the efficacy of practicing falling, is that this is more about bone quality. This is about, so bone density is how many bone cells you have. Bone quality is how those bone cells are organized within the matrix of the bone. And so just like if you're building a bridge, you want really complex triangulation of distribution of load, same thing in bone cells. And it seems that one of the things that contributes to bone quality is if the bones keep being loaded from different angles. And that means variety of movement, right? Because that's less about like really intense.
So let's do what are your top tips? You're not maybe going to like it though, for any suggestions of things you can do that help bone density that are not about lifting weights.
Ooh,
what can you do? What's a list of a few, so that people have a practical feel on, if I start doing these things, see how I feel, does it increase my confidence, etc., then maybe I might think about adding load as well.
Okay. So the number one thing, and again, research is very new, so there's lots of different perspectives on this, and different studies will back up different things, but it's probably going to be jumping.
Yeah.
And it's fun. It's totally scalable. So, anything from heel drops through to box jumps to drop jumps. Like there's a huge variety of different ways of adding impact into your life. And I think all of them are useful. So it's not like, well, I have arthritis in my knees and I can't do big jumps, so I can't do anything. No. You do the heel drops where you don't have to bend your knees, right? And if you can, you're like a CrossFit queen and you're doing like jumping up on huge boxes, do heel drops as well, do stomps as well, do pogo jumps as well, even though they don't seem as challenging. Again, it's about variety. And this is like when you're walking the dog and you're at the dog park, just do a little jumping. And if you have pelvic floor issues and you're like, oh no, I will not be jumping, thank you very much. Again, heel drops, stomps. And because your bone cells adapt to stimulation so quickly, there have been studies experimenting with different intervals. So you could do one jump, like kind of gather up your pelvic floor or your back or your knees or your hips or whatever, one jump, and then take a 30-second break. Do some arm swings, maybe do some leg circles, do another jump. And this is the kind of thing that you can do it with shoes. on or off for heel drops. For everything else, we kind of want your shoes to be on so that you're inclined to do a real, these are not pretty glamorous ballerina jumps. These are like big toddler in a puddle trying to make the biggest splash you possibly can type jumping, so that we get the best vibration and impact up the legs and towards the hips and the lower spine. So, you know, walking the dog, playing with the kids or the grandkids at the park, set a plan to do 5 jumps before you get into the car and 5 jumps when you get home. Like, just, it's the easiest thing to fit into your life and builds leg strength and hip strength.
Yeah.
And it's fun. If you're doing like a whole jump sequence, you get a little cardio going. There's nothing to, not as long as that's appropriate for your body, that's a really good one.
And builds confidence as well, because you know, I think there's a real possibility when people get to a stage where they literally don't want to leave the floor, and that is a security and a fear thing, and it's really understandable. But standing, and you don't have to jump off or over anything to start with, because as you say, start with heel drops, but then just see if you can jump in place and see what happens, see how it feels. You know, land toe to heel, so you don't feel that you're, you know, going to do yourself an ankle injury, but at least see if you can just get a bit more height and just play with it, because it's amazing how fun it actually is. And then I suppose then we've got other things like, you know, if you're someone who fancies trying skipping again, obviously pelvic floor could be an issue, but that can be addressed. That's for another program. And dancing, of course. You know, you see lots and lots of fantastic videos of midlife people learning the shuffle and things like that, where there's a lot of fantastic, gentle impact movement where you can build up to doing bigger jumps because you're used to doing lots of little jumps and those types of movement. And I think the one thing I love about things like the shuffle or different types of dancing is that you're constantly rotating every part of you in different ways as per what feels good, rather than how you think you should be doing something, so that dancing, it becomes playful.
Exactly. And I love the idea of dancing, again, for that kind of bone quality benefit, that you're just constantly changing directions and shifting and changing loads, and, you know, having an increase in that balance and agility and coordination. And you don't have to think about, I mean, you have to think about it if you're learning dancing, but you're thinking about it as, oh, I'm learning this fun dance, not I'm exercising. So impact is great. Dance is great. Hiking is great. Again, less about big intensity for a long period of time, is less effective than the short intense. But if you're really kind of scrambling, you're getting that same, like, oh, you have to kind of sidestep over this root, and you have to like do a step up. So you're really using your hip muscles to get yourself up here, and then you're using your thighs as you go down. You're going to tend to be in a more kind of multi-directional kind of movement than if you're just walking along the sidewalk.
So this is exactly. So in the UK, we don't tend to use the word hiking as much. It's more walking, but there's a differentiation where walking, we are assuming for this conversation, is much more along the flat, and you're going a lot further and potentially faster, but it's not challenging you in the ways that we're needing for this conversation. Hiking is much more undulation, terrain, steep up, steep down, rocky, as you say, you know, and steps, you know, even steps. So if you haven't got that available to you, steep steps, brilliant, especially coming down, I presume.
Yeah, both, because when you're going up the steps, you are ideally using your glutes and you're getting some of that stimulation and that pull onto the back of the pelvis, which can be helpful for your hips. And then, you know, in terms of stimulating the bone cells, unfortunately, it really does have to be that load, and reasonably consistently and progressively. So continuously increasing the amount that you're lifting, which is not as daunting as it seems like it would be, because as you acclimate, the thing that you're lifting doesn't feel so challenging anymore. And then you're like, oh,
I can do more.
I could add a couple of pounds to that. That's all right. And then it gets to be not so daunting. And then you add another couple of pounds and you just keep going. So it's not like there's a should. There's not a rule of every 2 weeks you must add more weight. It's not like that. It's very personal.
And it's not even possible because your body will tell you what it can do. Sometimes your brain will get in the way, and you'll think, actually, no, I can't do that. But if you check in and think, well, I could maybe try a couple, and then you realize you can, and then you get the confidence that you have, and you say, hopefully, brilliant, I did too. And then go down to the weight below. You now have this opening in your mind that something is available to you that before you thought, oh, I can't get there. I'll never get there. And you did. And that does happen over time. What I would say from my own personal perspective is just that getting, the longer that you do it, the harder it is to continually increase. And so, you know, luckily I have some weights available to me to do that, although the jumps are quite big, given that they're kind of not my weights. And of course they are, but you know what I mean? I need some more interim weights for sure. But I do find it gets harder and harder, but it amazes me how much I can lift from the get-go. So for example, in the earlier days, I would certainly start a lot lighter always, and then gradually build up. And now I have the confidence to start heavier and still build from there. And that really feels very, very different. And I think that literally, as you said, it's time and consistency that builds the confidence to do it. And I think that is everything in movement in general. Confidence in what you do is absolutely critical, because we all know our brains can just take over and say, no. And yet we need to challenge that.
And I think that's where it's so important to not get pulled into the shoulds. You should do, you have to do this, you must do this, whether that's cardio or strength training or whatever. There really does need to be an element of, where do you feel strong? Where do you feel confident? Where do you feel competent? Where do you feel, you know, maybe you don't feel joy, but it feels fun and engaging. And sometimes that's going to just be out moving, doing whatever it is that you love to do. And, you know, is that going to be a measurable bone density check? Maybe not. But being more active is better than being less active.
Yeah.
Overall, when it comes to muscle health, bone health, and everything else. And if we're talking about progressions, if you've not been terribly active, pretty much anything is a win.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you've not been walking for 2 blocks is a win. If you've not been doing any kind of sort of joint mobility work, which I think is really important, especially if you're somebody who wants to explore lifting weights and hasn't done any. If you want to get your arm up overhead, you kind of need to know where your shoulder joint is.
Yeah.
Right? To be able to do that well. And if you've been mostly tied to a desk job, your brain probably doesn't have a great sense yet of where your shoulder joints are. So start to play around with that kind of exploratory, get in touch with your body motion before you start thinking about, oh, and now I have to go to the gym. Meh. You know, get some bands, get some weights that feel challenging but not overwhelming, and start to play around with what moves feel good in your body. Like there's the Lift More trial in terms of the osteoporosis world. They did back squats, which is the one where you have the bar across your shoulders with the plates, because you can take more weight across your shoulders than you possibly can with your hands. Deadlifts, which is the one where you hip hinge, you've got a bar with plates, your arms are long and straight in front of you, and you're hinging up and down, straight for your back, your hips, and your legs. Overhead press, right? Straight up, they used a bar. I can't do that because I have a funky shoulder right now. and drop jumps. That was the 4 exercises. And so there has been kind of this messaging that like you have to do those exercises.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing those exercises with heavy weights, like what is even the point? That was just what they used for that study. And yes, they are sensible exercises. They really do target the spine and the hips in the ways that are effective. There's lots of axial loading with the squats and the overhead press. Axial loading being where the load is affecting the center of your skeletal being. But if you don't like them or you can't do them because you've got a shoulder thing or a hip thing, it's okay. Find something else that feels good in your body, that feels strong, confident, that you can progress, and that you feel like, oh yeah, that my body likes that.
Yeah.
Because if your body doesn't like it,
you're not going to do it again.
You're not going to do it. And potentially you're going to cause, an issue, a bigger issue. And now it's hard to move at all. That's the other thing, actually, across populations. If we have a thing, right, you have a sore shoulder, a sore knee, or a sore hip, the tendency is to just kind of stop moving entirely to protect the thing that's sore. And then that lack of movement everywhere else takes on its own problematic life. And so remembering that, again, whatever the internet says you should do, whatever the guidelines say you should do, if you're limited in those things because of an issue, find the things that you can do and that feel good. And you may need to keep, I've got tendinopathy in one of my rotator cuff muscles. And so I've had to be quite limited into just basically rehab exercises with this shoulder. But I'm still doing everything else.
Yes.
I'm still deadlifting.
Lots of body parts left. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And so I think the biggest message is to just keep moving and to find new ways and explore and do them in ways that feel fun, right? Go do something with your sister. Join a club that is walking or running, or take a fitness class, or, if you don't have a diagnosis, you don't have to worry about any kinds of limitations. You can just go for it. Just do things that provide your bones with new stimulation, whatever that might look like. If you have osteopenia, you want to be conscious of the movement limits. So the movement limitations, because I've referred to them a few times, it's flexion is forward bending, rotation and side bending under certain circumstances. Okay. Not just like we can't ever do those motions, because that's not.
No,
that's not healthy.
That has its own problems. Yeah.
That would have its own problems. It is weighted. So weighted with your own body weight would be like a roll up, like a sit up, kind of weighted with your own body weight, or rolling down with your whole body weight, or a weight, or grocery bags or something. We want to really get into that hip hinge strategy. Yep. Fast and forceful movements, and end range motions, which is sad for people who really like the big twist yoga Pilates type stuff. But you just back it up a little bit, right? Yeah. You go to like 70% of your range instead of 100% of your range. Go for active movement instead of kind of externally pushed movement. Yeah. So those would be the limitations. But if you have osteopenia, you don't have to be as conscious of those. And it is this like, okay, this is your moment in the sun to take charge of your bones and start adding this novel stimulation to kind of wake them up. And if you do get a diagnosis, yes, it is disconcerting. And there's no question that it takes, for most people, some people will get the diagnosis and be like, okay, and they carry on. Most people find it takes a moment to adapt to this new picture of how you're going to move and how your bones are doing. But it's okay. Like, I've increased my bone density, a statistically unlikely amount. I've increased my lumbar spine bone density by 7.3% using exercise. And probably I've had some benefit. As I said, my doctor, my endocrinologist thinks I probably had malabsorption issues since I was a baby. And I've changed some of the things about the way I'd never had any digestive issues. It's like, yes, But now we would see, I had skin issues as a kid, and I was a big fat baby, and then I turned into a little tiny baby. He's like, we would now look at those things as a malabsorption issue 60 years ago. You were just a sickly, finicky kid.
Nice.
So I think I'm now, like, I've always eaten really well. I come from a family that really values, home cooked food and all that good stuff. But I think I'm actually absorbing the nutrients now in a way I never did before. Yeah. But I'm not on medication. I might be someday. I'm okay with that, but I'm not yet. And it's not all a bad news story. Doctors will often present this as like, you have this and you shouldn't lift more than 10 pounds and you're going to be in a wheelchair if you break your hip and you should be careful and don't wear high heels. And like, the things I hear are just appalling. And that's just, it's not true.
And if you're osteopenic, can you reverse it entirely?
Can, not guaranteed.
Sure.
Like this is where it becomes challenging again, because there's so many contributing factors and we can't really know how any one person's body will respond to the stimulus. But yes, and it's proportionally, the more bone you have, every little bit that you increase is kind of proportionally more effective at getting you back up out of the diagnostic criteria. I will never get my spine out of osteoporosis. I can't imagine that there's any possibility I'm going to increase it that much. But my hips have gone into osteopenia from osteoporosis.
That's amazing.
Which is fantastic. My hips were never as bad as my spine.
Yeah. But also hip fracture is one of the most common things that people experience from a fall. So actually knowing that, that's really reassuring. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because, so I really like the Royal Osteoporosis Society of the UK guidelines, because the UK version is strong, steady, straight. That's kind of their order of operations. Strength train, balance, agility and coordination, and body awareness, posture and alignment. Kind of that's the order of operations. In Canada, the Osteoporosis Canada guidelines are balance, sort of everyday focus on the straight part, right? The body awareness, balance 2 to 3. They used to say every day, and they've simplified the guidelines to make them easier to follow, to say 2 balance sessions a week of about 15 minutes of progressive, challenging, dynamic balance training. If you can stand on one foot for 30 seconds, that's no longer your balance training. It's too easy, right? You need to stand on one foot with your eyes closed. You need to stand on one foot while throwing a ball at the wall. You need to, you need to stop standing on one foot. You need to start making it more engaging.
Dynamic.
And then strength training comes after that, because the perspective is, what's the ultimate outcome that we're looking for? And that is quality of life. That is having the best, most active and rewarding life you can possibly have. And we do that by avoiding fractures. And we avoid fractures by avoiding falls. So we play with balance first.
So
then we strength train.
So it's a mesh of the two. So let's take Canada and the UK, join them in the middle, mess them around and say all three.
All three are equally, they're all three are equally important.
Yeah.
And this is where that kind of personal vibe comes into play. Like, if you absolutely hate the idea of strength training, then don't strength train. There's going to be a payoff. There is a trade-off, because we know strength training, progressive strength training, is the most effective way to manage bone density. But if you loathe it, but you love dancing and hiking,
be really active.
You are going to double down on your balance training.
Yeah.
Because you can do at home, at the park, on vacation. You don't necessarily need any props. You can use fun things to do stepping over and do agility training with ladders or tape on the floor. but do the thing that's going to allow you to continue to do the things you love, right? If you love pickleball, I don't know if it's a big thing in the UK. In North America,
yeah,
like pickleball is now the thing. I don't know. And it's great. Like it's social, it's active. There's lots of moving. There's lots of cardio. There's lots of lateral motion. There's a fair degree of fall risk.
I think our version of that that's become more fashionable is the wrong word, but had a recent wave is paddle. So paddle tennis.
Thing. Yeah,
isn't pickleball in quite a small court? No, it's still quite big. Maybe it is the same. We need to look this one up.
we should look this one up. Yeah. But in either case, like
it's
if this is a thing you love to do,
jumping,
do lots of balance training so that you can keep doing that confidently. That you're going to mitigate your fall risk. If you do start to fall, you have a much better chance of being able to catch yourself and come back up. And that if you do fall, your brain is acclimated to lots of different positions and you're going to, as you said, probably fall better.
Hopefully. Yeah.
And then the other thing, there's absolutely having osteoporosis doesn't mean you are guaranteed to fracture. It just means you are more likely to fracture than the average population, but lots of people, my mom's had osteoporosis, same as me. She was diagnosed with severe osteoporosis in her mid-50s. And she's now almost 82. She'll be 82 this summer. Is that true? 82, 83, 82, somewhere in there. Last summer, she drove alone halfway across the country. And it is a very big country. It's a 3.5, 4-day drive to get halfway across alone to come up to the cottage to hang out with my sister and my 9-year-old twin nephews. The summer before that, she didn't come to the cottage because she was busy hiking the Alps with a friend. Like, she is so active. She is so busy. She's so strong. She comes to my Pilates classes. She lifts weights.
Yeah.
No fractures.
And maybe that's why.
Right? And maybe that's why.
And maybe that's why.
There is this, like, it's not a guarantee. Yeah. But the other thing is, it happens. And then you heal. Yeah. And if you are a person who is more vulnerable to fracture, I can't think of anything more worthwhile for you to do with your body than to be strong and active so that if you should fracture, you will heal so much faster. Yeah. And so much better so that you can get back to your life. I have lots of clients who've had fractures, hip fractures, not so much hip fractures, but spinal fractures, which is the one that everybody's scared of. Yeah. And they are lifting weights and looking after their grandchildren and hiking and sailing and skiing and like they're doing all the things. Yeah. So I think, again, doctors are inclined to be like, well, you have this thing and now you need to be super, super careful because if you fracture, you'll be in a wheelchair and dead in 6 minutes. Just like, please stop doing that to people. It's not true.
I think it's the best message of all, because not only does it apply to you if you've had a diagnosis of any kind to do with your bone health, but it applies to everyone. So even if you are completely unaware of what is happening with your bones, it's the same advice for everyone. And it's the best advice because it doesn't just affect your bones. It affects absolutely everything: your muscles, your brain, your hormones, your everything, your mental health. And therefore, I think that's a perfect note to finish on, because it's the reason that I have this podcast. It's the reason I do the work I do. It's the reason you've been doing the work you do for decades. And it's just brilliant to hear from someone who understands their body so much, has a diagnosis, but also has such a positive outlook about the way you can live life if you choose to. And I think that's, for me, been the most valuable thing in this episode, is to say that it's so key to just keep doing the stuff you love, add more if you can, be more aware, be more intentional. And I think we need to do that in every way with our bodies as we age, but most importantly, as the modern world gets more simplistic in taking away our movement. And therefore, I'm super, super grateful for your time and the information. It was packed with information. And I really hope it's been, as I'm sure it has been, very reassuring for people, which is exactly what I think is important to do when there is so many difficult messages to process in the world about this. So thank you so much for your time. But before we go, please tell everyone where they can find you and the things that you offer.
Oh gosh. Okay, so there are a number of places. Instagram is probably the easiest place to find me for the short bits. I have a YouTube channel, which I'm less frequently on. I have a
Give
Facebook.
me the names.
I don't
Search
know.
Alison Crouch.
Yeah, Alison Crouch Move Smart. I think the YouTube channel is just Alison Crouch. Instagram is Alison Crouch.
But we will link it all anyway, so we don't worry. It is in the show notes. So just in case Alison can't remember all her own details.
I really can't.
That's fine.
There's a Facebook group called Osteoporosis and Movement Solutions.
Brilliant. Okay, that's really useful for those particularly who've had a diagnosis. Yeah.
For those who've had a diagnosis. And then I have a bunch of courses, some of which are free, some of which are paid. So I actually have a free balance mini course that does a combination of kind of static balance exercises and then more dynamic in motion exercises, just to give you a sense of what a balance practice can look like. Super helpful for everybody. We all start to lose our balance after about the age of 40.
Yeah.
So it's a really valuable thing to just put a few minutes of that into the day. I have a pelvic floor course. I have a hips and knees course. And then I have my main program is a small group program for people with osteoporosis, which is a combination of a big recorded curriculum hub that you own forever, plus 12 weeks of live support and coaching from me and the other experts on my team.
Amazing. Super useful, particularly for those who have had a diagnosis and aren't quite sure how to move forward, where to start, and so on. So yeah, I would encourage people, if they have, to reach out to Alison and see what she has to offer. There's lots of great stuff.
And I think I gave you a link. I have a free resource that is sort of a guide. It's not an exercise workout, but it's a guide to how to exercise and work out for people with a diagnosis.
Oh yeah, that's very useful. Yeah, because that's the usual questions, I'm sure, that come up straight away, especially if you've decided that moving is for you and you realize how important it is. That's to get going. Well, thank you so much for your time, Alison. I'm really grateful.
Oh, I love being here. I will talk about, as I said to you earlier, I'll talk about bone health all day, every day.
Well, thank you for sharing it with us.
You are so welcome.
Before I wrap up, if you've enjoyed this episode, I'd really appreciate you taking a moment to rate and review Make Movement Matter on your podcast platform of choice. It genuinely makes a difference in helping the podcast and my message reach more people. And if something in this conversation resonated, I'd love you to get in touch to tell me how. Share a clip or a takeaway over on Instagram and tag me when you do. That's one of the best ways this message continues to travel. If listening today has made you curious about your own movement, not just exercise, but how you move through everyday life, and you'd like support to feel more comfortable, capable, and confident in your body, you can find everything over at reclaimmovement.co.uk. You'll find simple ways to get started, like my mini course, Happier Hips in 5 Steps, my 8-week signature course, Reclaim Everyday Ease, or access to a library of short movement videos and longer classes designed to help you integrate healthy, natural movement into real life, not add another thing to your to-do list. Thank you so much for listening and for being part of this community that's helping make movement matter in everyday life for life. Tune in again next week. And if you never want to miss an episode, you can sign up to be notified by email when new episodes are published by visiting the podcast webpage at reclaimmovement.co.uk/Make Movement Matter podcast. And in the meantime, happy moving more naturally.